Everyone is entitled to their opinion about the things that they read, they watch, they listen or taste. And they're also entitled to express that opinion. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Sri Lankans are facing a situation where we are no longer free to express what we want. We've seen incidents of these happening since the beginning of the year, maybe even towards the end of last year, when people lost their right to protest against certain decisions of the government. Even a simple group of two walking on the street carrying a placard were obstructed by the police. People were arrested for protesting on the street. Today we find this suppression and this opposition against the freedom to express our views, our thoughts, and our minds coming in the form of legislation. Legislation that will make it legal for different entities to impinge on the general public's freedom of expression. Now, to discuss these matters and more, of course, as always on Face the Nation, we've got a very eminent panel of guests, starting off with my left. We've got Attorney at Law Nuwan Bopage. He's a member of the Executive Committee of the Young Lawyers Association, quite an active member in Sri Lanka's political sphere as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Bopage, for joining us. On to his left is Attorney at Law Javid Yusuf. He's a former member of the Constitutional Council. Thank you very much, Mr. Yusuf, for joining us on our show. On his left is Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, former councillor from the Morotua Municipal Council, also a candidate for this election. Hopefully the election comes soon, Lihini. Thank you very much for joining us on our show. In the meantime, we've also got on our show this evening Attorney at Law J.M. Vijay Bandara. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on our show. And a person usually on this side of the table today is on the other side of the table. Shihaz Aniz, journalist. Thank you very much, Shihaz, for joining us once again on Face the Nation. Today you won't be asking the questions, you will be answering them. So to begin with, each of our panelists will get the time for their opening statements. Starting off with Attorney at Law Nuwan Bopage. Sri Lanka's peoples, the people of Sri Lanka, their right to freedom of expression. We had it. We had it in the past. We took it for granted. But now we're losing it. What do you think of these attempts by the government to legalize this, to bring in a legal framework to justify suppression, create a legal framework where people's freedom of expression is limited?
Yeah, as you correctly pointed out, in terms of the Constitution of Sri Lanka, freedom of expression is guaranteed as a fundamental rights of the people. And on the other hand, there are various of judgments delivered by the Supreme Court giving that assurance to the people. Of course, you are entitled to enjoy that right guaranteed by the Constitution. The only issue is now, when we directly come to the point, now government is going to bring an act, says that Broadcasting Regulatory Commission Act. So now, you know, when we think about last 3-4 months, government has created various topics like this: anti-terrorism bill and rehabilitation bill, central bank bill. Likewise, so can we analyze this out of the context? We can't. So what is the context that? Now this is the post-Aragale era. Now it is very clear, at the same time, now the government is entering into various agreements with the IMF in the guise of saying that this is the only solution for this economic crisis, and they are imposing various terms and conditions to the Sri Lanka. At the same time, we know there is no mandate from the people to run this government, because it has been, the Ranil Wickremesinghe became the president through it's just like a conspiracy, constitutional conspiracy. So in this backdrop only, we have to analyze these particular bills. Now it is very clear what is the prime objective of anti-terrorism bill. Now, you know, now recently, now they are going to there is a plan to bring certain amendments to the labor laws. So what is the ulterior motive behind this? Of course, now when comparing with other countries, the Sri Lankan labor laws are very strong. Strong security has been given for laborers. So because of this only, basically as lawyers we know, if there is an illegal termination, the workers have that right to go before Labour Commissioner and various institutions and protect their rights. So now they are attempting to actually amend these bills, and in future it is very clear most of these labour rights will not be there anymore, and the low cost labour at the same time under very severe conditions only workers have to work. Now these are the conditions that imposed by the IMF. So at the same time, when the government is going to implement these reforms, it is inevitably people has to come to streets and media has to express their ideas, and like the previous year, there is a eminent situation that people will fight against these steps of the government. So then government has to get ready with these inevitable trends. In that sense, I feel now they are trying to bring these particular bills. Now this Broadcasting Regulatory Commission, they are directly targeting media, mass media. So by bringing this act, they are going to implement a commission, and that commission will be appointed by the president. All 5 members are appointments of the president, and we can discuss later. There are various provisions as to how curtail the freedom of expression. So under this backdrop only we have to analyze this. So therefore, if the people of this country and the progressive masses, if they are expecting this particular freedom, fundamental rights and democratic rights of the people, it is now that there is a serious threat to freedom of expression and democratic rights of the people. So that's why we are gathering here, that's why we are discussing here. Now the issue is, now time to time government is bringing topics like this. So I don't, now for last 3 months I personally participated this kind of 5-6 discussions regarding various bills. Now what can we expect now? We know during the Aragalaya what is the main demand of the people. So they wanted to actually wipe out this uncouth political system, and actually there must be a social contract between the government and the people. So whatever they are said and done should be done according to the mandate of the people. The fundamental provision of our constitution preamble says the method of ruling the country is the participatory, actually representative democracy. Now these representatives, have they consulted the people? Have they consulted the media? Have they consulted the intellectuals prior to begin these kind of bills? No. 2 or 3 people gather and they think about their political future of their party and other privileges. Then based on that only, with various ulterior motives only, they are bringing this. So therefore, first of all, we have to rethink about what is the social contract theory. Social contract theory is, you are our representatives, you are liable, you are amenable to respect the mandate of the people. But the problem is, this particular government doesn't have that mandate. That's why they are saying, I have been appointed by 134 members, so I am doing whatever we want. In a situation like that, of course, we have to fight using these platforms, media, mass media, against this journey of this particular government. So in order to prevent that only, they are now bringing this particular new bill, Broadcasting Regulatory Commission.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bopage. Of course, when you said that they haven't consulted the media, they haven't consulted the people, it is the government's claim that this is not a bill. Well, of course, it hasn't been gazetted. This is a form of white paper, according to the representatives of the government themselves. But of course, even a piece of white paper, when it is so draconian, definitely raises some concerns, and that would justify the kind of response that Sri Lankan society has had to this Broadcasting Regulatory Commission bill. Moving on, we now move our attention to Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council. Mr. Yusuf, you've had dealings with Parliament as a member of the Constitutional Council representing the civil society. Now, according to the Broadcasting Regulatory Commission bill, one of the objectives or one of the duties of the Commission is to ensure that true and accurate information is disseminated to the public. Now, my question to you is, what is true and accurate information, and are 5 representatives necessarily appointed by the President able to determine what is true and accurate independently without any political influence? Your time starts now.
Thank you, Shalan. The question of truth and accuracy is a matter that the media itself will have to determine, because truth and accuracy can be, depending on the perspective which you are looking at, it can be interpreted. But coming to this fundamental question of this regulatory law or bill or whatever you call it, democracy, we call ourselves a democracy, and democracy can function only by the interaction of ideas and different opinions. Only then you get the best out of society by a clash of opinions, diverse opinions. You encourage it. And in that role, the media plays a very important role, because media not only provides the platform for diverse opinions, but the media is also a reflection or a mirror of society, of social happenings, the different problems that people face, which those problems are brought to the notice of those who are governing as well as fellow citizens through the media. Now we have classic example, the Aragalaya started with the protests of the farmers. They were the ones who set the whole ball in motion, as it were, and they are an informal sector of society. They are not like the trade unions or the organized working class. But they spontaneously rose and raised the issues, which of course snowballed into various other issues. Now, if there wasn't a free media to report that, those changes would not have been made possible. So the first thing is, there must be a free media. Now, the question of free media is always controversial from a government's point of view. Now, when any government attempts to regulate the media, one tends to be suspicious. Why? Because it is in the interest of the government, any government for that matter, to,
limit the flow of information.
Limit the flow of information and the nuisance value. They find some of the questions raised by media of nuisance, as a nuisance. So when a government is originating an attempt to regulate the media, regulate within inverted commas, regulation, I don't really see an objection to regulation. But regulation, under the guise of regulation, there should not be provisions that limit the expression of freedom and act as a chilling effect on the media. Now, ideally, what I would have liked the government to do, and before I say that, we have to also look at the context. In the last several months, we have seen an attempt to stifle protest, expression of opinion. Now, in that context, when you bring a regulation or a proposal, as you call it, with these type of clauses, it is definitely a cause for suspicion. But ideally, what I would have liked is for the government to tell the broadcasting media, there are several media, look, there is a problem, submit some proposals, or you all get together and regulate whatever has to be done. Now, in law, we have that concept of that a law is brought to remedy a mischief, that there is a situation that requires a law. Now, I don't see what that situation is. Now, the government must make that case. And I would go further to say that this is a problem we have with a lot of legislation. I think it is very important that every legislation that is brought must contain in the preamble setting out what the government of the day intends to achieve by that, because then it also helps the legislators to focus their attention and either accept or approve or reject, as well as for the courts to determine whether the provisions of the law match the mischief that is sought to be remedied. So I will stop for the moment.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf. Very interesting thoughts shared. We can get into detail during the next round of the show. Up next, Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, former councillor from the Moroto Municipal Council. Now, Lihini, this is an attempt by politicians such as yourself. I mean, not similar politicians, but you're all politicians. So an attempt by politicians to try and appoint certain individuals into committees. We all know how independent, again, within inverted commas, independent commissions function in Sri Lanka, and the length and the depth of their independence. So it's an attempt of politicians to appoint so-called independent commission to regulate what information the people have access to. Do you think that, again, the question that I posed to Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf as to what is true and accurate, do you think politicians or commissioners appointed by politicians are in a position to assess what is true and accurate? Hearing from what we hear in Parliament these days, and for the past 70 years actually, I don't see that. Do you?
See, Shalan, the fact is when politicians are appointed by a mandate to a particular position, they during their tenure bring in certain regulations, laws with different objectives. One can say that it is with the objective of sustaining towards the development of the country, or to making the country of a better place, or for the betterment of the people. Some bring in certain regulations purely for sustenance. Now here what we see is a situation where we have a parliament, a president who is not appointed by the mandate of the people, who was appointed by 134 members, and also we see a parliament which had 2/3 majority, which doesn't have it at the moment because due to the Aragale and all the activities that happened. So actually we are in a situation where there is no legitimacy, I would say, and all of these regulations are being brought from time to time purely on the fact of sustenance of power. That's what I would say. So this is also, this Broadcasting Regulations Act is also another, I would say, an undemocratic measure which has been brought by the president and the government to undermine the rule of law, fundamental rights and the democracy of Sri Lanka. Now we see from time to time throughout this year, they brought the High Security Zones Gazette under the Official Secrets Act, which was again withdrawn because there was so much of protest out there. Then the Rehabilitation Bill, everybody went to court, and then certain provisions of it was taken out. Then they brought in the Anti-Terrorism Act, which they thought was a counter to the PTA, but which was utterly disastrous. And then there you had similar regulations where they wanted to control media freedom, social media, all of that, right? And then now they are bringing this Broadcasting Regulations Act. So if you see throughout this period, all these regulations which they have brought in, for what purpose? Because we see now we are in this country is in a situation where there's a lot of anarchy. There needs to be reforms. There needs to be certain amendments that have to be done. There are certain changes that has to be done, and also the reforms that they are doing is not favourable by the people, and they're not doing as Mr. Bopage said that they're not doing these things with the consultation of the people either. So there is dissent that is coming in. So what the government is saying is, let's silence this dissenting voice, whereas that is not a form of democracy. A democracy, media is the fourth pillar of democracy. If a ruler of this country is to rule, he must rule in a scientific manner. He must understand the needs and the pulse of the people, and he must respect the dissenting views that are coming forward. If the ruler ruled in a democratic manner, there is no reason for people to come out and protest. But what we see is most of the things that are happening in this country are unconstitutional, undemocratic. So hence media has to voice out. Now, good example, you take the express persecution in this country. What measures were taken? Were the cases filed on time? No. Then you take the Pandora Papers. Were those cases filed? No. So, I mean, repeatedly we see the government failing, and today we take 7 million people of the population, that is 30% of the population are below the poverty line. There is malnutrition in the country, and people can't afford to have their 3 meals. Then people can't afford to send their children to school. So there are so much of pressing social issues. Then you take the income sources of the country. There is nothing concrete that is happening. Our debt portfolios are increasing, 85 billion to 91 billion in the first quarter. And so there are no concrete measures that they are taking towards taking the country forward. So obviously media has to report this, media has to alert. But what is the government doing? The government is saying, no, you don't report. You don't say the right thing. You don't report on national economy. You don't report on national security. You have to keep silent. Either you do what we say, or we will cancel your license. Simply it boils down to that. These regulations, I would say, clearly shows the desperation of the government, their inability to govern in an effective manner. Hence, they want to hide themselves under these kind of regulations, because right now, these kind of regulations are not the need of the hour. The need of the hour is to take measures to take the country out of the situation. But right now, what we see is bills like this. Who are they bringing these bills for? Is it for the betterment of the people?
But Lihini, now even Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf also brought this point. What's the mischief? According to the government, or the case that the government is at least trying to make, is the fact that media has been reporting on things that are untrue. They refer to certain reports published on media institutions during the run-up to the 2019 presidential election, where President Gotabaya Rajapaksa won. They refer to certain reports published by other media stations on that. Then recently, the president was heard saying that media burnt down his house. So aren't these real concerns?
See, media has an obligation to report the truth. If the truth is not reported, then there's an issue. But I don't see media in this country are not reporting false. It's just that the truth that they are reporting is not favorable to the ruler. Doesn't mean that truth is false. So what media is alerting the people, but it is not in favor of the politician. Obviously, in journalism, there is a fact, you'd say report the truth, and also the media, they add their input as well, which gives the people the right to think. I mean, editors, newspaper editors, they write certain articles giving the people the right to think. Right. So just because it is not in favor of the government doesn't mean it is wrong. So what I see is the leader or the ruler of this country is not governing in a scientific manner. Hence, bringing various reasons to shut down the truth being disseminated to the people, which is taking away people's right to democracy. And I think it is time that the people of this country understand this, and closing measures of truth being disseminated to people is not the way to go. A ruler who rules correctly will not fear the media. Sadly, we are in a situation of that. So.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, former councillor of the Moratuwa Municipal Council. We'll get into more details on that in just a short while. Moving on, Attorney at Law J.M. Vijay Bandara. Sri Lanka has had a long history of rulers trying to suppress communities, suppress the people. Initially, it was only communities. Minorities were suppressed through legislation like the Sinhala Only Act. Then, as time went on, the entire country was suppressed to a certain degree with the introduction of the executive presidency, and a president with such broad powers. Has Sri Lanka really not learned from our past experiences? Why do you think that the legislators of Sri Lanka think that it is better for our country if people just shut up? Your time starts now.
Yeah. In a democratic country, it is the globally accepted norm that there must be a constant dialogue between the people and those who are involved in governance. That dialogue is always been facilitated by media. Therefore, in a democracy, that dialogue shall not be shut down by any means. Now, what I see is I am not a believer of this thing. I firmly believe that this so-called law would not come into force. Having said that, what this anti-terrorism bill and broadcasting authority bill or regulatory bill attempts, normally in our legal system we have civil law system, criminal law system. The in criminal law system, there is a specific state mechanism to deal with criminals. That is because we consider crimes are offences against the state. Therefore, specific police teams, EQD, Attorney General Department, CID, whole of a mechanism is set up to deal with criminal activities. Now, in the latter part of 1990s, as President himself claimed that he was the instrumental in decriminalizing defamatory laws. Recently I heard he was saying that. Having said that, now what he has taken a U-turn. You start asking, haven't we learned a lesson? Of course, people are gradually appears to be realizing these things, but not the rulers. So, present president has taken a totally U-turn in attempting to introduce this Broadcasting Regulatory Commission Act. What will happen if this law comes? Forget about all the section. What will happen? Another criminal state arm will be created in 5-member committee and also 3-member investigation committee. They will have the criminal enforcement power, including raid, seizure of equipment of media institution, arrest, remand. That's it. That's it. Not to try a particular media institution and punish if they have committed a crime. These laws will not go up to that level. Prevention of Terrorism Amendment Act, which is abandoned, and also this law set up a particular forum with the mandate to run according to wishes of the executive branch of the government. Then they will always act, as you said, not independently, but by words of the people, those who are in power. Therefore, having in the year 2000 or closer to that, abolished the criminal defamation law after famous Singha Ratnatunga case that was tried in High Court of Colombo. State criminal arm should not be utilized, that is a norm of those laws, against the media freedom. But now what they are trying to do is reintroduce that criminal arm in a different name or different form, and so that executive branch can manipulate everything, including what is truth and what is wrong. Who can decide this? Now, presently, if you criticize any minister's conduct or policy, any media institution provide opportunity to that minister to explain. Odi alteram partem. Any media has that ethics. You are not just saying that only the criticism. Always, if you watch a news, we see that minister explain, then opposite side, trade union explain. There are diverse opinions. So that is the only path that people can extract the truth. But if utilizing this criminal arm, and if a particular 5-member henchman, I am sorry to say this, can decide what is truth and what should be disseminated and what should not, then how come people receive information freely? How media institution could disseminate information to the society to facilitate that dialogue, which is a must in a democratic society. Therefore, if this law is passed, definitely it will have very serious repercussion, but I am pretty sure that this law will not come into effect.
Well, Attorney at Law J.M. Vijay Bandara, given your years of expertise, I definitely trust your judgment better than mine, and I hope that is truly the case. Moving on, we've got an individual who would directly be affected by these sort of legislation, because this individual, of course, would probably write something that would affect the national economy, whatever that means. So let's hear from him of what he thinks about these pieces of legislation that aim to regulate the media, as the government so calls it. Shihar, Ani's journalist. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Shalom. First of all, let me tell outright that I reject this so-called white paper. I'm a firm believer of freedom of expression. There could be self-criticism or criticism about how the broadcast firms behave in Sri Lanka. However, self-regulation is the best mechanism to regulate any media institution. The government in 1997 tried the same thing, but it was shot down by the Supreme Court. And then they tried again in early 2000, but luckily we had this Press Complaint Commission in 2003, so that print media are now self-regulated. Right? Now this is, they say that there is no self-regulation among the electronic media, and that's why they want to come up with. Now let me tell you, the industry is as such that if you, I mean, you as a media institution, you cannot always go with fake news. People are intelligent. The viewers are intelligent, right? Audience are intelligent. They get to know about, how this media institution work, and then they switch to another credible media, right? So there is a mechanism among the media institution if you go for this, fake news or, some false information.
It's a natural mechanism,
It's
not
a
something
natural
artificially set up.
Yeah, it takes time, that's true. And it, of course, it can harm some people. And it can, I think, it would have cost some people, winning election in the last 2019. So that's why maybe, that might be the exact reason why they want to kind of, come up with this white paper. But the self-regulation should be the mechanism for, to regulate media, not a law by the government. Government might say, okay, you need this because there is no self-regulation, that's fine. But the question is, it's government. It's government, right? So where is the independence? Where can we draw the line of independence? I mean, Sharon, you correctly said that, the experience of Sri Lanka about independent commissions, we have never seen, right? You cannot name any independent commission in Sri Lanka that has been independent.
I think the Minister of Justice recently said in Parliament that commissions are not working because they're not independent. We've never had independent commissions.
Exactly, right? Here the commission, almost all the members are appointed by the President, right? So where is the independence, right? Now, if you take other countries, there are commissions like this, right, similar to this, but they are truly independent, and even if the government complains to them, they will independently verify, investigate, and then rule, and they will come to a conclusion. Whereas here, nobody has confidence in that. So I think it's kind of a diversion at the moment. They want to kind of, tell the media, okay, we are looking at you, we are monitoring you, we might come up with this, but whether they can do that, of course they can do that if they want, but how it will have an impact, I think it's a huge hit on the freedom of expression, right? But if you go through the bill, they say, it's to ensure accuracy, accurate information,
Information in line with culture is another part I really didn't understand.
Yeah.
What is our culture?
So basically they want to manipulate things in a way that, so they are trying to define something. And everybody has to follow what they define as, accurate information or freedom of expression.
Thank you very much, Shihar Aniz, journalist, also joining us on our panel. Usually on this side of the panel, but today on the other side. Which do you like better, Aniz? That side or this
That
side?
side.
This side is better. This side is better, of course. So we'll draw our attention to two other journalists who are joining us on our program to pose the right questions, hopefully the accurate questions, according to the objective of this bill, to our panelists. On my right, we've got Shania Dedigama, no stranger to the show. Thank you, Shania, for joining us. And on my left, we've got Niresh Eliathambi. So Niresh, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Shalan. So I'd like to start off by saying that I've been in this media business for 34 years, and I think our colleague Shihar will agree with me that almost all of the misinformation which comes to the media actually comes from people in power, in office. It's not the man on the street whom we interview who lies to us, because there's always a lot of people on the street whom we interview. There's always some minister, some member of parliament. I mean, they lie in parliament. So it's a matter where the misinformation is coming from those in power. Now, we spoke of freedom of expression, Shalan. I think all the panelists did so. But I look at it, it's not this bill, I think, if I may ask Lehini, it's not about freedom of expression, is it? Isn't it about the freedom of information, the right to know of the population, of the voters, which is a fundamental tenet of democracy? Lehini?
As I mentioned, media, fourth pillar of democracy. People have the right to know the truth. Media has a right to report the truth. So this here in this particular bill, if you really look at the objectives of the bill, ensure broadcasting services shall provide people true and accurate information, which is a given, I would say, in any case. I mean there are certain set of regulations, self-regulatory mechanisms that you follow. So you are expected to report the truth. But then, and also, as you said, very right, you said right to information, dissemination of information is what the media does. Say tomorrow if the media is shut down, how will people know the truth? How will people know information? So here, by bringing regulations and stifling this kind of, through these bills, what the government is trying to do is, stop the passing of information. And now they are interpreting it, saying, there's one of the factors here is you shall broadcasting services without any detriment to national security, national economy and public order. So how do you define national security? How do you define national economy? So tomorrow, say you report issues pertaining to the stock market, you report issues pertaining to the fertilizer issue, then the dollar going down. I mean, these are information. Can that yes, obviously every information does have an impact on the economy, but that doesn't mean that the people should not know the information. So is the government today trying to say that media should not report information? What is it? Then what does the media do? What is the objective of the media? Why should media exist? Then government might as well say, no, we don't want a situation, we don't want media. It can come to that.
If I could just follow up on that question. So you were just saying, why do we need media, right?
Yeah.
So some could think that, okay, so in the UK and in the US, so the UK just proposed a draft bill this April, I think. So in the US, they also have this Federal Communications Commission that regulates licenses.
Yeah.
So they have the right to determine access to broadcasting. What is the danger in this country with a bill such as the one proposed?
So the one proposed here, the thing is, again, I want to clarify. I was just overall saying why government can question why do they need media. So this objective of this particular bill is they are bringing in a commission. The detriment of this is that they are bringing a commission who is the 2 ex officio members and the other 3 members who are appointed by the president. The danger is that the commission becomes the self-authority. They become the sole authority who can take decisions on behalf of the entire media landscape in this country. Regulate license, cancel license, decides who reports what, go into raiding, come in and stop, get information from media institutions. I mean, how do you ensure the independence? So these are the drawbacks and the glaring issues in this particular bill. Now, I also want to say that there needs to be regulation in this country. Everything can't operate in a haphazard manner. But regulation does not mean stifling people's right to know the truth, and bringing down people's freedom of expression or freedom of association, and also people's fundamental rights as guaranteed by the Constitution. Everything should happen within the four corners of law. Also, there needs to be regulation, but not to suppress that. But the thing is, the objective of the government in this instance is not that. They want to, they have different agendas. They want to, silence the truth being gone to the people. They don't want media to be opinion formers. They don't want media to be the next force, I would say, who would give the people the right to think, or, the force that will change government. They don't want negative reporting. They don't want conflict reporting. They don't want people to have certain information to think. That is the whole objective here. Again, as I said earlier, we are not governing this country in a scientific manner. We are not governing in this country within the democratic principles. Everything that is happening is against the will of the people. It is like an autocratic situation where an autocrat is trying to, say, I'm showing I'm governing in the manners of the rule of law, but he's trying to rule by the law. Hence, he wants laws, or whatever, the government wants laws to, hide themselves. That is the sad story
So the difference in our country's bill and every other regulatory commission is that this is completely state controlled.
State control, yeah, state control. And I mean, if you really look at the objectives of this and entire objectives that are given, you don't see any objective to, towards the betterment of the people. It's just purely government's objective of, how can we stay in power, how can I control the media. That's the long and short of it, which is a sad story.
Let me add you something because of the, the national economy. I mean, reporting of national economy, it's a important, at the moment compared to last decades, because we are in an economic crisis, right? So, for instance, like domestic debt restructuring, everybody wants to know what is it, right?
Yeah.
So, for instance, if this bill is passed and if somebody wants a report on that, I mean, as journalist, I will be thinking 1,000 times, what should I report and what shouldn't I report?
But also, Shiar, isn't truth something that we as media ferret out because it's our reputation on the line as well? A few weeks back, we had a government minister who said that the Sri Lankan rupee was the best performing currency in the world, which we as journalists, we knew was due to an artificial situation that was created in the economy. And of course, now when you look at the rupee this week, it's one of the worst performing currencies in the world. So I think us not reporting and supporting that particular minister's false statement, well, the minister would be very angry about that.
This is why I told you, Diresh, about the self-criticism. I have my own self-criticism because we are, we basically, we are based on quotes or comments, right? We are doing journalism with quotes, only based on quotes, right? We don't, our journalists don't do in-depth research, and they don't really give the context, right? So because of that, it's easy to mislead the public, or even, without their knowledge, we mislead the public, right? And that could, in fact, create misinformation and fake news.
But then shouldn't the priority be to regulate the politicians and the people in office rather than the messenger?
Exactly. I think, I mean, if a minister says like that, best performing currency, the media itself, should have, brought or put forward the, facts. Look, this is the worst performing currency last year, and this is best performing currency in the sense of, in terms of, for this year, maybe, from 360 to 290. And now it's again depreciating. And as you correctly point out, it's an artificial situation where we don't pay debts, our imports are already banned, so they are trying to kind of relax some of these bans. So you don't see much dollar outflows, so there you see inflows, right? So with this artificial situation, your currency, of course, will perform well. Right? It does not necessarily mean that your rupee is strengthened and the world's best performing currency.
Since we're talking about, truth and accuracy, I'd like to pose a question to Attorney General Nuwan Bopage. Now, the Aragale happened in Sri Lanka, and since it began, there have been many statements made regarding the Aragale. There are ministers now who claim that the Aragale was funded by NGOs, that the Aragale received dirty money from many countries overseas. There are ministers who even claim, as they always do, that the Aragale was a conspiracy by the United States of America. So who would judge the truth and accuracy of these statements? Like, this is just for my reference. Like, if I am previewing a story where a minister is saying these things, post Broadcasting Regulatory Commission Act era, I'd have to be cautious because I don't want to publish anything that is not true and that is not accurate. So who do you think would judge the accuracy of those statements? Would those statements be accurate? Is this conspiracy statements and all of that?
Yeah, of course. Now, first of all, now let's assume that there were no long petrol queues in this country. If there were no shortage of medicines and food of this country, of course, one can say that ministers' arguments are correct. But we know under what context that Aragale was erupted, because of the severe sufferings of the people and because of the economic downfall, only this Aragale was erupted. Therefore, it is very clear you need not to have further analysis. Now they have an issue with these Aragale because this Aragale directly challenge that uncouth political system that they are maintaining in this country. Now, as you said, at the same time we have to respect the freedom of expression of these ministers as well. So they have a right to express that idea. Now that's why, now for a moment that I am not saying these mass media, television, these companies, they are independent. Of course, there are government media and at the same time private media. When these media are running by the capital, of course, they also have agenda. So that is the nature of this liberal democracy. Ranil Wickremesinghe is the godfather. He appears as the godfather of the liberal democracy. So that, being a person that being just like a godfather of liberal democracy, can he facilitate, can he bring these kind of acts? So my main argument is, now there is a mechanism, self-regulatory mechanism in the country as far as the media is concerned. Now you know certain media during past elections, how they use for election campaigns. We know how the snakes come and likewise, though how they promoted these particular individuals, we know how it happens. Now recently I heard that a lot of news items, their actually ratings have drastically going down. Now that is the mechanism. The people starting to think, they starting to actually refuse these kind of practices, and that kind of self-regulatory system must be there as far as the media is concerned. Of course, if there is a community media, if the people could actively participate of information, media, that is the ideal way, which I expect according to my political wish. Because if the capitalist controls media, of course, that agenda is there. We can't prevent that. But the best thing that I believe, there must be mass media, there must be community media, and people could participate in these cases. There must be self-control like that. But the problem is, now while they are maintaining this liberal democracy, why they are bringing these kind of acts? Now, for example, going further, now when you carefully go through the section 5 of this particular white paper, all the words are contained regarding the control of media. Word licensing, regulate, guidelines, policy, code of conduct. Likewise, when we see this vocabulary, it's very clear all the words are contained to control the media. So that transpired the ulterior motive of this. Then we can discuss this further as to how they are going to control the media when you thoroughly go through this particular section one by one, licensing mechanism, monitoring mechanism, and how to suspend in the media, and rules and regulation. All these things are contained in this. Now, in Sri Lankan context, we know there are a lot of regulatory mechanisms like that. So how they manipulate that, how they use in their for own betterment. So we have been experienced for last 75 years in this country. Now, at this juncture, there was no demand from the part of the people to bring this kind of bill. Of course, there was a demand from the people to amend the constitution, bring right to recall, insert fundamental rights like right to life. So these kind of demands were there from the part of the people during the Aragale. But they are not even tell one word regarding these actual demands of the people. On the other hand, they are bringing these kind of bills which never be demand of the people. So therefore, answering your question, it is very clear now these ministers and the ruling party, actually they are now, as I said earlier, they are not representatives of the people anymore. So they are now working, acting for the survival of their power. The other side is the people. Now, actually, you pointed out another thing is right to information. Right to information is also part and parcel of the freedom of expression. Now, there's a case, the Fernando versus Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. There's a case. In that case, actually, government banned a particular program. Then Supreme Court held one listener of that particular program filed this particular case. Supreme Court held that right to information is also a part of the freedom of expression. So he has a right to hear that particular program. Now, if the government take over the control of this program, how we preserve that right to information?
But that is before the right to information was enshrined as a constitutional fundamental right. Now there's no issue there, right?
Exactly. But I'm saying,
even at that time.
Yes, the fundamental basis of that argument is that government should not interfere with these regulated mechanisms. So therefore, the people has the right to freedom of expression, freedom of information. So all these things, there's a self-regulatory system in that. For example, now let's see the Facebook, social media. When I express some idea, people can comment, people can share. So within that framework, that may be, there might be dissenting ideas.
So people can like, dislike.
Exactly. So within that framework, we know how to handle ourselves and how to maintain that discipline. But you see how, now for example, in the Ramsi Rasik case, what happened was, Ramsi Rasik wrote in his Facebook, to face these attacks on Muslims, we need an ideological war. He put the word of
jihad.
Yeah. In order, the jihad is a struggle. He specifically said ideological struggle using pens and keyboard. So then in his Facebook page, people, they have a dissenting idea and various other comments which cannot even unacceptable comments. However, within that framework, it was governed. Nothing has happened. The state interfered. And Defense Secretary lodged a complaint to CID and arrested him without any complaint from the civilians. Once the state interfered, then it becomes an ulterior motive of a person.
Mr. Bopake, do you remember which year this incident happened?
It's 2019 during the COVID period. So that's why we have a concern about once the state interfere with, all the time it is tainted with political ideology, at the same time ulterior motive. So when we apply it to this particular bill, it is very clear all these regulatory mechanism ultimately will be part and parcel with a political view, and it is not independent anymore. All the measures to be taken for the sake of the power and for the sake of their survival.
Mr. Yusuf, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just had a question for you. What are some of the inconsistencies you see in the bill? For example, I've seen in Section 5C that licenses will be annual, and that could affect, for example, investment in media broadcasting, because generally towards the end of the licensing period, investment is withheld. What are such inconsistencies that you see in the bill?
Well, actually, my view is that looking at the provisions of this bill is a waste of time, because the bill in totality is bad. Because sometimes, but of course we can look at some of those just to give an indication of what the ultimate goal is. Because this is, now let's take that regulatory commission. There is not even a pretense that it is going to be independent. They are all government appointees. So there is not even a pretense of independence. So why do we start arguing about whether they should do this or that? With regard to your question on licensing, what I would say is, there can be an annual license fee levied under certain criteria. That is perfectly okay. But you can't be giving licenses every year. Like you said, there are so many issues, no? Capital, employees, security of employment, and every media organization and probably any business operation, they like to look long term, they have to plan and so on. So the business of giving licenses annually is not on. But then, as I said, I don't really need to think that we should waste our time on that. Now look at this question of, one of the things they want to regulate is a discussion on the national economy. As you rightly said, that is the key issue today, the national economy. So how do you not encourage a discussion on that or prevent? Now, for instance, the issue of the IMF. There are people who ideologically believe that we should never go to the IMF. That's an ideology.
Vasudevan Anakara, I believe.
Yeah, Vasudevan
part of the
Anakara.
government.
And personally, I too don't believe that we should go to the IMF, but because of the desperate situation, and there is a saying, no, desperate situation requires desperate remedy. The economy was run down, totally mismanaged to such an extent. I think we have to go to the IMF at least as an interim measure, and then rebuild the economy. So there are people who probably still say, like Mr. Vasudevan Anakara, don't go to the IMF, whatever. But the how democracy functions is because you have a clash of ideas, opinions. People have to form opinions. So this whole business of not discussing national economy, even the Constitution does not provide for restrictions on freedom of expression on grounds of
National security.
no, national security there is, but that has to be narrowly interpreted, but not on national economy. So this whole thing is bad. Like they say in the legal, bad in law. This is bad in fact also.
Bad in fact.
So what I'm saying is that I for the life of me, I can't understand why this was done. No.
But Mr. Yusuf, now since you've had your little stint with parliamentarians and all that, you've interacted with them during your tenure in the Constitutional Council. I think Mr. Bopake brought up this argument, and he said that the current president is a very liberal president. He's some call him the godfather of liberal democracy in Sri Lanka. So now, what I can't really understand is you get these individuals, these political figures who inherently have certain policies and certain ideologies that they've stood up for. And now you've got a situation where two political parties or two heavyweights in the political sphere here in Sri Lanka with drastically different ideologies. They may have acted the same way when they came into power. That's a different matter entirely. But with completely different ideologies merging together and bringing maligned acts like these. So what really do you think has happened there? Because you have the president who is a liberal Democrat bringing in these draconian legislation. Then you have a conservative kind of government, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, who claim that they are for freedom of expression and that they support freedom of expression, but still highlight the need to bring an act like this. What happens here?
You know, actually, these are some of the issues that I also find difficult to unravel. Because if you look at President Ranil Wickremesinghe's tenure as Prime Minister during the Yahapalana government, when both President Maithripala Sirisena and Ranil Wickremesinghe were lampooned, torn to shreds by the media, by the opposition, they did not adopt this draconian type of approach, particularly for the media. Now, and not only media, but even for other things. But now, with this, with the Aragale, you know, there has been some transformation. Now, if you remember, just prior to President Ranil Wickremesinghe becoming, I think, Prime Minister, he was very supportive of the Aragale. He appointed various of his party people.
No, that was after he became Prime Minister. He appointed
after
Ruwan Wijewardena as his coordinator for the Aragale.
That's right. So, but before he became President. But after he became President, something has happened which I cannot figure out. One explanation, so I don't want to be uncharitable also, is probably, you know, all the changes, there have been changes in various fields. One field in which no changes have been made is in the defense establishment. The defense establishment of Gotabaya Rajapaksa still remains. And this may have to do, this again I am speculating because as you say, we don't have concrete evidence. The executive presidency is a disaster from more points of view than one. Now, when you have, if you look at the past presidents, you know, they get isolated. Then when there is a security threat, they are greatly dependent on what the defense tells them. So they are not in a position to judge. This, let's go back to previous presidents, because they were, when the war was on, there were definite security threats to presidents. So they were sort of cocooned under this so-called defense security threat. So the executive presidency, now if you look at President Ranil Wickremesinghe, because of circumstances also, he's basically alone. There is no, the Pohot tour, of course, now if you listen to the Pohot tour MPs and all,
they want ministerial portfolio.
No, not minister. They are like, they are out. They are the saviors of the economy. Now we are bringing up the economy. Now see, there are no queues. After doing all the damage, so you can see the trend, you see. So my point is to come back to this, why, and I think he raised this question, being a liberal person with liberal views, why this is happening. So I can't figure out, and coming back again to this whole issue of suppression of the media, you know, it's also counterproductive to any government, because the media is a, what do you call,
empire.
It provides government at ways of sensing the pulse of the people. So if it's all bottled up, it can explode. And I must also say one thing about these independent commissions. I don't agree that the commissions have not been independent.
All commissions?
All commissions. There are commissions which have been independent to lesser or greater degrees. But of course we have to build on that, because these are recent exercises.
Yes.
So there are commissions which are independent, but this particular one, there is no pretense at being independent. So we shouldn't judge it by
at the
that
same
standard.
level.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
Mr. Yusuf, would you say that this particular bill is an example and perhaps should be put into the law books as how not to write a bill for Parliament to...
White paper, Niresh.
White paper, whatever color you want to call it. It's so ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, as you rightly said, we cannot even figure out what they are trying to achieve except the worst. And as I said, when you come with government, originating from government, naturally anybody views it with suspicion. Then when you see the context in the past several months, where protests are not only encouraged, they are curtailed, demonstrations are not allowed. So when you take all this, it is not surprising that people tend to believe that there is some wrong motive. And also don't forget that once you put these things into the statute books, the very people who put it can be at the receiving end and a subsequent account.
Very true.
Now, Lihini, you're from the Samagi Jana Balavegaya. Your party was once part of the United National Party. So I take it that at some point in your life, your policies and views aligned with those of our current president. But what do you think has happened now, Lihini?
Actually, it's shocking because this particular president at one point was, I would say, was considered to be an epitome of democracy. I remember back in the day when the 2018 constitutional coup happened, we were also the people who were on the road fighting for democracy, and you know, we
with
him fought so hard at that time. It was
and
a people
for him,
and it was a people. It was irrespective of political affiliations. Everybody came down because everybody believed in the office of injustice that happened.
And there was many aragalia in front of temple trees, almost.
Yeah, and then he was one person who was a victim, I would say, at that point. And you know, it is actually surprising for him now, when he is in the executive position, a person who protected democracy, to bring such undemocratic legislation. So, I mean, it's like a complete U-turn on him. I mean, at the end of the day, Shalan, leaders must govern with certain policies and principles. If you are a democratic leader, you will be a democratic leader. There are certain governing principles that you will adhere to. Now, you can't take a complete 360-degree turn. So, when he does things like that, it actually questions him. I mean, whatever he did back in the day in 2015, and also especially when he became Prime Minister, within the Aragalaya period of what he says versus now when he's sitting in the executive, what he's doing is completely contradictory. So then, you know, you tend to question who all these leaders, so-called leaders which we have, do they, I mean, who are they? What do they believe? I mean, can they take turns of this nature? Then, I mean, we absolutely, going forward, we will never have any confidence in any of the leaders in this country.
I mean, Lihini, I don't think there is any argument there, because now, take a look at the Sri Lanka Podujana parliamentarians, take a look at some of the biggest critiques of President Ranil Wickremesinghe, Mahindanand Aluthkamge. He said, I won't sleep until Ranil Wickremesinghe is behind bars. Well, should be an insomniac by now.
We have very opportunistic political culture here in this country, where people, you know, take turns simply on the fact of securing power. I mean, if the Podujana Peramuna back in the day criticized Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, how can they come back and endorse him? I mean, they criticize his governing mechanisms, his policies, everything. From his mannerisms, foreign policies,
his sexuality at times,
everything. And now today he is like a hero because he is the only person that is left for them to basically cover up their sins. I mean, how can our politicians be so double-faced? I mean, when you look at all these things, you and I can't be surprised why this country is in this particular situation, because we have not been governed by people with ethics and principles. So forget about, you know, resurrecting the economy. At least get your governance mechanisms right. We don't have that. I mean, clear example is the president bringing these undemocratic laws. I mean, what more are we left? So we have to, I think, go back and question our governance, our principles, people who we elect, people who we vote, people who we put into office, our political parties, everything. I think, you know, we are in a complete anarchy. And it's a situation, I think I would say, we are in something like a deadlock in this country with no solution, but just piecemeal solutions purely on the basis of survival and in the pre-context of fixing the economy. But at the end of the day, it's all problems which are shooting up day by day.
And apart from just us, apart from it affecting us, on a world stage, how will this sort of thing impact Sri Lanka's position in a global community?
It's actually, I mean, you know how we went to the EU at one point, and where we were talking about safeguarding our human rights, our democratic values. I mean, at that one point we were almost losing the GSP plus, and at that point this particular president as well as Mr. Mangala Samaravira went there and gave I think with regards to the PTA back in the day,
an undertaking
that they will work towards repealing the PTA. They gave that confidence, and then on the other side, now they are bringing an ATA. So, I mean, this is like what a U-turn. Where do we stand as a country? See, again, we don't have economic policies, we don't have foreign policies, we don't have any policy in this country. So, I don't think our leaders or any politicians know what we even stand for. So here we are, bringing pieces of legislation just for timely survival or discussion points, but no concrete solutions even to take the country forward. Sad situation, very alarming.
Now, Mr. Vijayabandar, I'd like to pose this question to you, where now, although this is viewed by some as a media bill, it is in fact a bill which would affect all segments of society, isn't it? Including, I mean, there are segments of society, mainly in Colombo here, who are quite happy with the status quo at the moment. But does it affect everyone, this right to information and basically the need for information, including for business purposes?
Yes, it's affect everybody. This is an utterly impractical thing. Now, this says the matters connected with the incident that and acquired the establishment of the Broadcasting Regulatory Commission to regulate the broadcasting services and for matters connected therewith. Somewhere I heard that say truth and correct dissemination of information. Every episode, every incident, scenario has 2 or 3 versions. Even court of law, if you force parties to tell only the truth, that can be one version, then there can't be 2 versions. So at the end of the day, if you do not entertain all the versions available, there can't be a way to find out the truth. So if somebody or the executive branch decide what is truth and what is wrong, then versions are not permitted to bring in.
Well, wouldn't it also stifle all forms of dissenting voices? For example, if you were to bring the president and the leader of the opposition to the same table and ask them the same question, they would, most of the time, they would have diametrically opposed answers. So it's the duty of the media to take all of that with the background information to the public and let the public decide. But if bills like this get passed, then it's a matter of only one side getting heard, and then all segments of society would not have that information.
Exactly. What is media right now doing is to accommodate all the versions. The state or the governors are heard, and the trade unions or opposition political parties also are heard. The citizens also are heard in respect to various incidents that is taken place around the country, whether maybe farmers or fishermen or university lecturers or students, all the sectors are heard and all the versions are disseminated. That is the meaning of disseminating the information. Other side of the coin is try to receive the information. So therefore, if one organ or one law say you can tell only the truth, what is the truth? Who determine the truth? Who adjudicate this? Even before court of justice, there are 2-3 versions. All versions are heard. All versions are accommodated. Then at the end of the day, judge decide in court of law. In society, democratic society, you are entitled to hear all the versions. Then it is the citizen, it is the receivers who analyze this based on their political opinion. That's why diversification of opinions. So they analyze and identify what is truth, what to be believed and what not to be believed. So that is democracy. So therefore, no point of going to section by section. The basis of this particular paper is utterly irrational. So there is no way in the globe or in this planet to tell exact truth. What is the exact truth? Who says and who decides?
But Mr. Vijayabandar, now government representatives, we've had a few government representatives on our show on Face the Nation, and their contention is that this is similar to laws in the UK, laws in the United States, and there is a specific liking of several politicians, and I've seen this in the statements that they make to the media, of bringing in laws that regulate the media that are similar to Singapore. And their argument is if Singapore is such a developed country, it is bound to have good laws to regulate the media. So we need to bring those laws into Sri Lanka, and there's nothing wrong in doing that. What do you say to that argument?
It indeed wrong. We are economically struggling country, and we have to deal with the fertilizer, medicine, and so many problems unlike Singapore, UK. And also their culture is that their norms are regulated by United European communities. Of course, now UK is not a party, but still there is a European Court of Human Rights. In that, they have developed many number of norms. So there is nothing for the British citizen to get panic or whatever the law that is being introduced, because all laws are governed, controlled or conditioned by those norms. When it comes to Sri Lanka, we are still struggling to implement the independent commission. We know what is our culture is.
And we don't even have post-enactment judicial review. If by mistake a legislation is passed that infringes on a fundamental right, maybe that amendment was brought during the committee stage, we have no way whatsoever of challenging it.
So all the versions are artificial. The big president, how he became president, also artificial. When Mr. Wajira Abhiwardhan saying, Singapore he was asking for people. When, as Mr. Usman once said, any law, if it has to be converted to a black letter law, there should be a social demand for that. Social demand. Now, who demanded this Broadcasting Regulatory Commission law? Was it the citizen? Was it the journalist? Was it opposition? Was it civil society? No, none of those. Who advocate this now? It is the post-Aragale cornered 134 MPs and they are elected president. So they are the one who talk, and they are the one secretly sitting in a committee, maybe 5 people, and they say, I don't know whether truth or wrong, they drafted this 5-member committee. All 5 members are rejected members after the Aragale. What is the legitimacy for them to bring in this regulation when there is no social demand in the society? Who asked? Even bar association asked? No. The religious leaders asked? No. Journalists? No. Then, as Mr. Yusuf rightly said, that any law would not just become law unless there is a social need. So what is social need? Can anybody, has any government representative explain what is the social need to bring this law into operation? No, they are not answering to that question. They show their animosity. They show their anger. We were labeled as corrupt. That is their concern. We were labeled as corrupt by media, by social media, by Facebook, by Instagram. Therefore, we want to punish. Now, be ready to face. One of the ministers, I can't exactly remember, now you be ready to face repercussion. And he was pointed to media. So this always shows the whim and fancies of the totally rejected members of parliament and totally rejected solo president, I say. He doesn't have a party. It's a solo journey entirely. And now, just after Aragale, there are many sectors of society demanded non-political interim government. You remember? Non-political interim government, because there is no room for us to get ready for next election. What is Ranil Wickremesinghe now doing? All his advisors are being appointed as electoral organizers. What is that? Normally, president's advisors are intellectuals. Now, all the advisors are organizers of respective electorates.
Mr. Yusuf, a free media in most countries is also a champion of the oppressed, of victims, of whether it be of government action or other actions throughout society, victims of robberies, murders, whatever. You know, when it comes to stifling the media, wouldn't all those issues also explode? Where if the media can't report on social issues for fear of repercussions, then how would governance be possible at all?
Yes, that is true, because it is a national loss when that happens, because as I mentioned earlier, the media functions as a mirror of society, reflecting the different concerns of different groups, which sometimes don't get reported to the powers that be. So once that source of information to the government and to the rest of society is shut down, then certainly governance gets weak, because then a benevolent government, even if they wish to, cannot provide remedial action. So, I mean, we are really laboring the point, because it's obvious, unless there are people who refuse to see, that the media must have freedom. Of course, freedom with responsibility. But there are laws already in place which can take care of such situations. So this is where the media should not be curtailed in any form, because those in government always look at short term, that so long as they are in power, they would like to keep the media in check or keep the media under control. But they forget that in the in the long run, it is detrimental even to them and to the country as a whole.
And you mentioned that there are people who refuse to see, and in Sri Lanka, especially in Colombo, that does happen from time to time. But would you agree with me when I say that even when those people are perhaps targeted for whatever reasons, it is the media who will turn around and champion them, no matter who they are, whether they are billionaire businessmen or destitute villagers?
Yeah. One of the tasks that media plays is to highlight injustices in whatever form, whether it be individual, whether it's group, or whether it's in relation to economic forms of discrimination. I mean, if you read a range of newspapers or broadcast media, you will see different stories. And some of those stories we never would hear if not for the media. I mean, particularly for the ordinary citizen who is going about his day-to-day work, it's a media that brings reality of society to their doorstep.
Shihar, don't you think it's rather ridiculous that we have to discuss things like this when there are far more important issues? Like today there were 4 shootings in Sri Lanka, including I think 3 in the Greater Colombo area. Don't you think those are the more important issues?
That's true. I think I told you, like, this is a complete diversion, waste of time, utter waste of time, and we basically waste our resources to discuss this, right? Whereas the real issues are the economy. We don't know how this country is going to go back to the recovered position. We don't know how far or how long it will take, right? Some experts say it's 5 years, right, to go back to pre-economic crisis level, right? And we don't know what's going to happen next, right? We talk about state sector reforms, SOE, state-owned enterprise reforms, right? We don't know how many people are going to lose jobs, right? They are talking about right-sizing the state sector, right? So when you talk about these issues, I think these are the key issues we need to kind of focus.
High level of migration also included.
Exactly, right? Professional brain drain, right? Whereas now when you try to kind of stifle the media and try to kind of create this fear psychosis that you can't report this and that, right? Where are we heading?
So would you say that actually there is not enough discussion of national issues due to, of course, these constraints that we are faced with?
Of course, you are wasting your time, right?
Yes.
TV, you are wasting your TV time
Discussing
for
this.
this, discussing this.
Lihini, actually, there's a question for you from one of our viewers. and it says, so since you're from the SJB, would the SJB never bring in new legislation to regulate broadcast media? And how a SJB government would handle fake news, violation of privacy and protection of minors from media excesses?
See, I want to say this. SJB is against this bill in totality. There was a statement that was also made. But then, as I earlier said, to govern a country, there needs to be regulation. There needs to be norms. So, if at a point when SJB comes to power, if there are certain regulations that are being brought in, they have to be brought in. That is the role of the government. But it should never undermine the fundamental rights of the people. Laws should be implemented, but within the regulatory within the framework, not to the extent of curtailing people's freedom of democracy, freedom of expression. So I would say at such a point, there will be democracy, and people will also have the right to question the same way that it is. And then if that is a government, the government must accept it constructively, and then go by with, because the way to govern is not to silence the people, but to have a journey with the people. That is the trueness of democracy. So at a point, I can't say SJB will not bring in regulations. SJB will bring in regulations, but it will be within the corners of democracy and to ensure people's fundamental rights are not violated. And also I want to say one thing regarding the 2018 presidential coup. When that happened, it was a complete shutdown of media, and it was only your media station at that time gave the voice for the present president at that time. When the 2018, I very well remember that when 2018, when the constitutional coup happened, when when that whole situation in the country, when how the state media operated, and where the opposition at that, where we didn't have a voice, and then it was only your institutions that was actually who came forward and who stood by the people. So I mean, it is a complete U-turn for him to control this media. I think it's one of the factors that people must go and question.
Shalan, if I may, there is a news alert which came just now, which is very relevant. The UN Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights, I believe in Geneva today, stated that, and I quote, "The past months have unfortunately witnessed the old reflex of using draconian laws to curtail opposition and control civic space, with a heavy-handed approach to protests too often, including the arrest of protest leaders and forceful crowd control measures, as well as the persistent use of the military in police functions. Recent arrests over statements made during comedy performances and of members of parliament engaged in protests exemplified this concern." Again, this is the UN Deputy High Commissioner for Human Rights.
Very true.
Thank you very much, Naresh, for updating us on that status. But we're now coming to the final few minutes of the program, and as such, we'll end the round of questions from the journalists. Thank you very much, Shanaya. Thank you, Naresh. And we will move on to the closing statements, and of course, no new arguments can be brought. We will discuss and then bring some finality to this fruitful discussion that we had today regarding the freedom of expression, and of course, what the government's direction is right now for Sri Lanka. Shihar, if we can start the closing statements with you. Sure. You'd each get a time period of 3 minutes. Yeah. Your time starts now.
I think the government has not learned from the past mistakes. The government should know the bill itself will turn against it. For instance, nobody thought that Gotabaya Rajapaksa will be dethroned, right? It's because they only believe the media, which they brought in, and it was a kind of a control media at that time. And I still remember when the fertilizer issue was highlighted by, I think it's you, the government believed it was an opposition, it was basically a fake or a misinformation by the opposition. But then they realized the truth when actually it was happening. It was a reality, right? So, and it was a shock to everybody when people turned in thousands and tens of thousands, right? So that showed the power of people, and until that time, media was basically backing that government, right? Most of the media, right? Then they realized that, okay, things are changing, and then they started independent reporting. Now, from that itself, any government should, learn a lesson. Right? If you control the media, you will see only what you want, not what the reality is on the ground. So that's I think that's a lesson that any government should learn, and you should never control media through any legislation. Let it controlled by the self-regulation.
Thank you very much, Shihar Aniz, journalist. We now move our attention to Attorney at Law J.M. Vijay Bandara for your closing statement. Your time starts now.
In an environment where legally due elections are indefinitely postponed, that is the major concern, where people's right to expression is curtailed. And we all can see the parliament and the president, the relationship. Parliament members, mainly the government members, doesn't want to face for an election. The president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, is the judge who can decide whether put them into election or not. So they have to coexist. So they have to please President Wickremesinghe so that parliament would not be dissolved. On the other hand, President Wickremesinghe is struggling to, being a single person in the parliament, to build up his own party, not the country. To build up his own party, not the country. He is still just making various experiments. So his entire time is spent over that. IMF was there just get a temporary breathing because of IMF, but have not planned anything for the future. Of course, we can say targetlessly 2048, right? Without any target, without any accountability. So this is the situation. These, though at the commencement I told that this bill will not become law, but if it is stable in the parliament, I am sure it will be passed by the parliament, because parliament doesn't want to show that the parliament lose any motion, because they want to survive. Parliament need to survive. They don't want to face for an election. President Ranil Wickremesinghe want time to build up his party to face presidential election. Those are the needs, not the people's needs. So that is the situation in the country. Therefore, these type of information regarding passing new laws will not be a success, and also government is not, my analysis is not keen to bringing in these laws, but they want to day by day put certain topics for the media and people to talk, to suppress actual requirement, as previous speaker explained. So we are facing many number of problems. Even what is the accountability when a patient goes to hospital for a surgery and he's blind, and then 2 or 3 mothers died. So what is the accountability? When it was asked,
and when the Minister of Justice was questioned,
yes, I am just reporting. When it was asked from the Minister of Health, he talks about this bill without answering. So this is a good topic, jovial topic for them to talk, and to compel us to waste our time.
And we're playing by the tunes.
Therefore, I invite all the media institutions, including yours, will prioritize the requirements of the nation and will have topics to talk real issues. If this comes, we always stand with you to protect media institutions. But requirement of the time is not that. We'll have to talk more about why young generation is migrating, why intellectuals are migrating, how many lecturers we lack in university to run the day-to-day affairs of universities, and what is the number of attendance in school after COVID. No school life for children. If you just take statistics and publish in your news telecast or whatever it is, that will be a very worthy and valuable information for the people to know what is the actual situation that we are faced with right now. Younger generation, no sports, no school curricular activities, no attendance. So their entire life, 2-3 years, senior years, lost. Nobody concerned, nobody talk. All the institutions, in conclusion I say all the institutions are collapsed already. There is no governance, no order in the country. Nobody is taking responsibility for any. That is very sad situation. So we'll, after today, prioritize what are the actual issues and talk. But if this is impact coming, we'll stand with you all.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law J.M. Vijay Bandara. We now turn our attention to Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, former councillor from the Morato Municipal Council.
I want to say this. It takes courage and vision to engage in open dialogue, and for a leader who actually wants to govern a country with in a scientific manner, will actually listen to the people, will value dissenting opinion, will create a culture of democracy where people can actually debate, talk, will create a healthy media culture where people can actually report the truth. So what the situation we have right now is when you know that when you don't have the legitimacy, though you are on paper legitimate, when you know that you are holding for power by force, you have no other choice but to bring in certain draconian laws to hide your sins. That is the situation that you and I are facing today. That is why we repeatedly see bills of this nature being brought repeatedly, simply because they know that they have no other way but bringing that authoritarianism to govern. But this is not the way that Sri Lanka should be governed. Today, we are in a very sad situation with about 91 billion worth of debt. The economy has contracted by 11.5% in the 2023 first quarter. 7 million of the population, 30% of the population are in poverty. Since 2019, 4 million people have been included to this line. About 47% of the people in this country have limited their portion sizes. Then 32% of the households have sold their assets just for consumption. 50% have spent their savings just to live. So, I mean, we are in a situation of that sort. And today we saw how we don't have the daily essentials, medicine, people's daily right to life has been challenged. What are the rulers of this country doing? I mean, we know that our debt percentages have increased. There are no proper sources of income generation in this country. There's no proper economic plan. We're talking about reforms. We're talking about state sector inefficiencies, mismanagement. Then there is corruption. We see the government institutions being corrupt, ministers being corrupt, but laws are not implemented. Law enforcement in this country are extremely weak. And there's a stolen asset initiative recovery programs which are not being taken into considerations. There are ample issues in this country. Dengue epidemic is rising. Local councils are not functioning. There are no elections. So there are so many issues. If we really want to talk, if we really want to prioritize, if the leaders in this country are sincerely interested in governing this country in the rightful manner, there are many more things that they must focus on, not these legislatures of this nature. So what I want to urge the president and the government to act far more responsibly and not to take the people's lives for granted by bringing these kind of draconian legislatures simply to stay in power. This is a sad situation, and leaders in this country also must understand that they are temporary custodians who are being appointed. They are not appointed for life, but leaders in this country think that they are here for life and they want to go on and on, change legislations purely for their survival. And I think people in this country are completely fed up. They came down to the road during the Aragalaya, they showed their voices, and the government is trying to control them. But the people of this country will rise again when the time comes. But we ask the leaders to act responsibly and not to act in such a callous manner and to take people's lives for granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Lihini Fernando, for that very emotive closing statement. We now move our attention to Attorney at Law Javed Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council.
Yeah, what I want to say is that the best thing the government can do now, in view of the diverse opinions where people have expressed concern, the media has expressed concern, is to withdraw this. And if the government has any legitimate concerns vis-a-vis any media, the broadcast media, in whatever form, to write to the media institutions and say these overall issues are concerning us, please send your proposals, and start a process where stakeholders can get together and regulate. And the best option in my view is self-regulation. The print media has taken the first step, preempting government attempts to control at a particular stage. And there is a self-regulation in the print media. It is good if the broadcast media, the television and other channels also self-regulate, because professionalism requires self-regulation, and merely because there are excesses or mistakes made by any one or more media, or at one point of time, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You take action to deal with a particular situation. For instance, one situation that the whole country faced was when some sections of the media played a very detrimental role vis-a-vis communal harmony, coexistence, and when national reconciliation is so much a need of the hour, there have been areas where the media has been found wanting. But when you move towards regulating those things, you need to do so with an eye on the Constitution, which is the fundamental framework of the law, to ensure that the individual and collective rights of the people are safeguarded, and only to the extent necessary to remedy, as I said, the mischief that the law seeks to remedy. So, in short, I would suggest that the government withdraws this unacceptable piece of legislation, and as Ligini mentioned, we have a whole host of drastic economic issues which we have to deal with. So the country's energies should be directed to that at this point of time. So we should follow that path rather than engaging in divisive, non-productive legislation or other governance steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Javid Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council. Finally, we move our attention to Attorney at Law Nuwan Bopage, a member of the Executive Committee of the Young Lawyers Association. Your time starts now.
Actually, we have been experiencing this behavior for last 30-40 years. We know in 1978, UNP government brought most draconian law of the country, that is Prevention of Terrorism Law. Then criminal defamation law was there. Then subsequently, we know what happened to Premakirti Alvis, Richard D'Souza, during that tenure. Then thereafter, we know what happened to the journalists such as Lasantha Wickramatunge. Then in the year 1997, they brought same kind of law, Sri Lanka Broadcasting Authority Bill. Then, in fact, we know during the Yahapalane period also, they attempted to bring same kind of laws. Now, once again, the Ranil Wickremesinghe regime is bringing this kind of law. Now, what we have to open a dialogue with the people, why these same things are happening one after another. Because actually the main concern should be of the people is to build up a participatory democracy in this country. All the time we are believing this so-called representative democracy. However, on the ground, once they appoint to certain positions, they are not representing the people. Therefore, the message given by the Aragale is we need a change. That change should be participatory democracy. How the people should participate in decision-making process. How the journalists like you, how the media participate in the decision-making process of in respect of media. So that is not there in this country. I know there are respectable politicians, respectable lawyers who are participating in these particular political parties. However, once they become power, the situation is different. Now today, even we cannot trust whatever these political parties, because once they become political power, their stance, their conduct is completely different. Therefore, the concrete solution for this issue is to build up a new system with participatory democracy. We have to fight for that. Therefore, I invite the people to, we have to build up that particular dialogue as to how we build a participatory democracy system in the country. Otherwise, time to time, we have to face same kind of scenario in this country as far as the democracy is concerned. Therefore, there's no issue, there's no dissenting idea, we have to defeat this act. How we defeated the ATA? Why they stepped down the ATA? That is because of the people's uprising. Media and general public fought against that bill. Likewise, if we really want to defeat these bills, of course, we have to show the power of the people. Likewise, like happened 1 year ago. Therefore, I wish and actually I invite people, build up your power, trust your power. If you can show your power on the ground, only we can defeat this kind of attempts. Therefore, this is that dialogue we have to continue move forward. That is how to build the people's power and at the same time how to build up a participated democracy system in this country.
Thank you very much, Attorney at Law Nuwan Bopage, Executive Committee member of the Young Lawyers Association, for joining us on Face the Nation tonight. And once again, thank you very much, Attorney at Law Javid Yusuf, former member of the Constitutional Council, Attorney at Law Lehini Fernando, former councillor of the Moratuwa Municipal Council, Attorney at Law J.M. Vijay Bandara, and also Shihar Aniz, a journalist. Today, however, sitting on the other side of the table. Also, thank you very much to Shanaya Dadigama and Niresh Eliathambi for joining us as our journalist and asking the right questions from our panelists. Of course, today, since the program was about freedom of expression, there are many freedoms that have been enshrined in Sri Lanka's constitution, and there are many freedoms that have been accepted globally. Freedom from torture, freedom of assembly, freedom of movement. And American writer Scott Howard Phillips writes something quite amazing about these freedoms. He says, "You can't pick and choose which freedoms to support. You either support them all or you support none of them." Thank you very much for watching. Take care and God bless.